Hi, it's Allison, coach, facilitator, and the founder of the Inherent Worth Connection. And today we're doing another episode of Unveiling Value, Exploring Inherent Worth within System Structures and Society. And today I have my favorite person with me, my husband, Ryan. And he has been an educator for over 20 years, 23 years. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And he has been in many different roles within education. He is currently the principal of our local high school. So I'm excited to hear and discuss what he has to say about inherent worth, and especially as he's experienced it and as he's experienced it as an educator. So thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
It took us a while to make this work, but I'm glad we did.
Which is kind of crazy. I like probably should be the easiest one to set up, I suppose.
You would think. That's life. All right, so let's jump in. The first thing I ask all of my guests is, how do you define worth?
So I look at worth as two things, I guess. Is like worth is the value that a person places on themselves, but also like the worth can be defined as the impact that a person has on their community or their perceived impact.
Okay, so sort of an internal and an external.
I look at it as two different. Like you have that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation type of things. I think worth can be looked at as the same basic. So that you have an internal worth, and you have that perceived external worth.
Yeah, okay, super interesting. So are they both perceived by like what I perceive my own internal worth and external worth, are you saying? Or are you saying the external worth is defined, or we're thinking it's defined by what other people think of us?
Well, I think it's all internal, right? Your
Sure.
worth that you're going to place is all internal. But if you're looking at that, like you have your that value that you're placing on yourself, right?
Mhm.
I think it is in two ways. Like it's that internal like value that you have, but also your perception of your external value to others.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. That's a really good way to look at it, because we do definitely pull from the perceived notion of what people think our worth is and what we're contributing, and
So,
then just
yeah,
our
absolutely.
idea of what our worth in general.
And obviously, I think other people will deem you worthy or unworthy, but to me, like that doesn't necessarily matter. That other people's perception of me. Um,
Mhm.
so
That's good. I think you're probably very rare that you can let that that part not impact you too
I think
much.
being 23 years in education makes you a little dead inside sometimes.
Oh,
So I mean, especially in the position that I'm in, I go like, we have virtually every day I make someone unhappy.
yeah. You
So
have to have thick skin
yeah, well,
in
yeah.
the role you're in. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that is super interesting. And I'll be curious, like, as we continue to talk more, how some of that stuff plays in. But the next thing I want to go into, if you're willing to share, do you have a memory that you'd like to share of a time where you really doubted your worth and maybe what kind of impact it had on you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started in education in 2002, 2003. And then, felt for the first 10-ish years of my career, like I was a fairly decent teacher. I got good results. Kids were, learning, respectful, had a good thing going on. Went into some administrative type roles, and as I was preparing for my first principalship at an elementary school, which, never have been an elementary person at all, was always a secondary high school like teacher. Um, just thinking back, I had, as I was getting ready to assume that principalship role, apply for that job, I had a teacher come up to me and said, I'm not sure you have the skill set necessary to run a building. And there's a person I very much respected, had a good relationship with them, and like that that struck me. That one was hard to get through. Like, I'm like, man, I've worked really hard for like 10 years. I've established myself in the district, and then having that person like, yeah, you just don't have it. And that was like, I had a difficult time, and my confidence was pretty low, and I got the job, and I stepped into that job, and like kind of took on that challenge of like, yeah, I am ready for it. And there are days when I thought I wasn't, that's for sure.
Mhm.
As any new job, it takes some time to learn that job, to learn your strategies that you're going to use to cope. But yeah, that one was rough when you have somebody that you respect and value their opinion say, yeah, you're not it. It's like that one hit hard.
Yeah, I
And
imagine
it
it
wasn't
did.
you.
Well, yeah. I was pulling for you to get that job.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? To have that kind of feedback
Yeah.
from somebody, and thinking that they probably had your best interest at heart, if it
Oh,
was somebody
absolutely.
you really
Yeah.
respected and looked up to and was a mentor. Um, but yeah, I
And
imagine
I
that was
still
a
respect
blow.
that person. And I like for now, as I look back and reflect on it, like I can see, like, yeah, I needed some of those skills. I needed to develop some of those skills.
Yeah,
But
kind of
also,
hard to develop though unless you're in it.
exactly, there was no way I was going to develop those skills if I wasn't using them,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
trying to do something different. So that first, 2 years of being a principal, and especially at a level that I just wasn't familiar with at all. Like, I probably did not manage my time super well. Like, I probably did not have that work-life balance that I probably needed to have.
yeah,
But I did gain a ton of valuable experience and tools in my toolbox, for a lack of a better term, to help manage a building.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think it's also interesting to notice, maybe not necessarily, obviously, that particular experience or interaction made you question your worth and your value. But I also find it's interesting how, as we look at those kind of things, because you have to, in many areas of your life, you have to step out, take a risk, potentially fail to even build, like you said, build those tools, or you have to allow yourself to have those experiences. But if you sit in the fear or the comfort zone to kind of, place a shield around your worth or your perceived worth, then it's like you
Yeah.
never grow.
Well,
You
yeah, and
never,
I think that's the hard thing for a lot of people to do, is like, obviously no one wants to fail at things that they're
no, of course not.
and especially like as a educator, like if I fail, like how many other people, not just myself, like how many other people am I failing? I'm building a
Mhm.
1,400 kids, and 160 staff members, give or take. Like, if I fail, like I'm failing, a small town.
That's a lot of pressure.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting to think about. And actually that's a really good transition, I think. Because we in these episodes, I really like to not only talk about personal experience, but also experience in a system or a structure within society. And, where you're willing, I think it makes a whole lot of sense if we continue to talk about education and how inherent worth plays into, as you've experienced it, the education system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so awesome. So I'm curious, what role do you think inherent worth or, the systems of value, what kind of role does that play in education?
Well, so and it's hard because like each individual that walks into the building on a daily basis has their own story, right? And so you're dealing with in my case like 1,500 stories a day, give or take.
Yeah.
And even though you're a small community or however you'd like to look at it, it's like the concepts like the worth and self-value in the education system, like it shapes so many different things. Um and so many things that are also beyond an individual's control, beyond my control, in some aspects of the conversation. I look at kids that are questioning themselves or questioning their role in society, or and probably not only you know or struggling with their own self-worth, but then seeing a society that may not value their worth as well.
Mm.
Does that make some sense, or am I just rambling?
Never. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I think especially because you're at the high school level right now. Now, kids all throughout the spectrum of growing up and obviously into adulthood, we always find reasons to question our worth. But I think those years, um, especially like the teenage years, can be really tough with questioning their own worth, figuring out how to fit in to society, and then also being at that age where the outside world maybe looks at you as more of a nuisance than and maybe that's not the right word, but yeah, oh, you're still
Yeah,
too young to really contribute, or
well, and
questioning how you can contribute.
and as an institution, like we obviously prioritize different subjects, different skill sets that we deem valuable, but it's hard because with the way things are shaped and changing so fast, like trying to develop a skill set for someone to be successful 10, 15 years down the road, and not knowing what 10 and 15 years down the road is going to look like, it is a difficult thing for us to do, and to manage resources appropriately to get kids to reflect on that and contain and continue to have their self-worth, um even though they might struggle with the traditional system.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially I feel like education has gotten so much better in that way of recognizing different learning styles and different potential futures,
And I
but
would say
that has to be hard.
we're doing a better job of that, but we
Mhm.
still, we know that everyone learns at their own pace. We know that everyone has their own unique skill sets, but we're still a seat time based organization.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily do a great job of allowing kids to flow faster through school. Now we do some things, or we don't allow that relearning, reteaching aspect as much as we can, just because we do have that constrained timeline.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on you again as an establishment because the kind of the responsibilities placed on you to, and obviously it's the role of parents too, but to make these kids grow into independent functioning adults that can contribute to their community.
Well, and it's also, if a kid knows what they want to do and what they want to be, like obviously that makes our job a lot easier, right? But
Hmm.
we're also asking 14, 15, 16-year-old kids to make a decision about what they want to be for the rest of their life. And that's
Mhm.
also kind of an unfair thing for us to do.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, it's really unfair. Yeah. Because those kids are still just, again, figuring out who they are and where they fit in.
right,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and then trying to figure out what, again, what they want to be, yeah, in 10 years, 15 years. Yeah.
Well, if you look at the data, people change careers like every 4 years for the vast majority of our society, which is a crazy, number that I'm probably making up and not isn't even correct. But
I know
like,
there are a lot of career changes.
well, that, and we have with the with AI taking the forefront of a lot of things, and manufacturing changing, and I think about even not only the 1,400 kids that I have here, but our own two. Like, how are we
Mhm.
preparing them for 10, 15 years down the road, and what can we do to make sure they have the appropriate skill set to navigate whatever gets thrown at them.
Mhm. Yeah, and to go along with that is to navigate what gets thrown at them without it shattering um their perception of themselves. I think
Well,
it's like,
well, you're right, because like, as we look at education, like, we're measuring worth through grades, through standardized testing, through, what kid can comply with some asinine rule that we throw at them.
Mhm.
How can we, so there's lots of different things that we do that impacts a kid's self-esteem, their motivation, their opportunities for post-secondary, institutions. So like, there's a lot of things that we do as an educational system that if not done appropriately can extremely like harm a kid's self-worth.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. That's such a hard balancing act. I mean, um, yeah, your job I would never want.
Neither do most people, but that's okay.
Takes a special person to be in education and try to manage and balance all the different aspects. Like you said, you have the requirements and the way that the different testings and all the different things that are kind of required. I mean,
Well, and it's
by
not even that, but those requirements are that constantly moving goalpost too, because anytime a new legislation is enacted, anytime you get a new governor or a new, you know, uh,
yeah.
legislation, legislative act, like, then we change it again. And as we change it, it's generally not that we get a bunch of resources to go with that change.
Right.
So how do we use the resources, or diminishing resources that we have, um, as the changes keep coming?
Right. Exactly. And your role also is, yeah, not only to comply with all of that, again, we're talking about helping the kids build their confidence and self-esteem and realizing, allowing themselves to be as authentic as possible. And then also I feel like you have so many stakeholders that you are beholden to in education because you have the students, the parents, all your employees, whether it's teachers, paras, custodians, food service, all the people, and then the community at large, because
Yeah,
you are a public school.
right. Well,
You
and
have opinions from all of them too.
as much as I don't like to say this, but like, then, and everybody thinks they're an expert because they've been through school, right? So,
Mhm.
and they turn that um experience that they've had, positive or negative, right?
Right.
And that's what they lean into. And there's a number of our parents and community members that haven't had great experiences with
Mhm.
education.
Of
And that
course.
that is still a part of the stuff that we need to overcome, is that
Mhm.
parent and community perception of what we're doing and how we're preparing kids. It's
Right.
not that's not the basic reading, writing, math that we get to do anymore. There's a lot more to it.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, so something that we have maybe mentioned, talked about before, just you and I. you talked about like the value of education aligning with issues like of equity, quality education that can contribute to inequality. So can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, it's interesting because like in the state of Iowa, we have resources that are relatively equitably shared. Like it's a student-based system for funding and resources. Now, where you get into probably some inequities is what some of our more affluent areas can do, versus what, some of our more rural, poor areas are doing. So, if you're looking at property taxes and you're looking at, the facilities that kids are able to learn in, like, we're very lucky here and in our town with the resources that we have available for kids.
Mhm.
But like if you compare our facilities, which would be envied in multiple areas across the country.
Yeah,
We have a $9 million science wing that, is less than 5 years old. We have,
right.
athletic facilities that are second to none if you look around the country. Um, but we still like, and then I look less than 20 miles from us, and we have a school of 200 kids, K-12, not just nine, like K-12, and there's no possible way for them to get the same experience.
Yeah, that's true. There's no way they could have those kind of
It,
resources or
it, it's not
facilities.
it's not possible.
Yeah.
So, we're really lucky in that respect, but that sets up then, as we've driven around the country and we've driven
Mhm.
through some cities that you would see are very urban, right? I'm trying to remember when we were maybe Alabama, Mobile, maybe, and
Mhm.
and we were driving past a school with plywood on windows,
And it
and
was a functioning school for
yeah, and it
sure.
was a functioning school,
Yeah,
right? Like, I don't understand, like, that is not an equitable system. And you think a kid that is growing up in that school, which those teachers might be amazing and they might have great people and great resources in some areas, but like, how can you compare that district and that school, that environment to one like ours where, we have, it's just such an inequitable system, but those kids are expected to be doing the same types of things when they come out.
right.
And
They have the
that's
same expectations.
right,
Yeah,
absolutely. You're supposed to be a functioning adult, right? When you leave high school, and that's just not the case. And the experiences that we are able to do as a district versus some of our neighboring districts, some of the like, the amount of international travel that our kids are able to do that
yeah,
are
yeah,
sponsored by us as a building or as our community. Like those experiences don't get disseminated out throughout the country. It just doesn't happen.
right, right. Yeah. So it really sets kids up in certain districts, it sets kids up to be miles ahead of kids that are coming out of some of those other districts that don't have the resources.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, it does.
yeah.
And I
So,
don't know, like, it's not like I have a great solution to that because if I did, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be doing that, right? But
right.
it's hard though. Like we're expecting all of our students throughout the country to have the same results with such a different input into their system.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. So how do you think, how would you imagine that impacts those kids' worth? Like if somebody comes out of a district that's got all the resources and all the things in the world versus a kid that comes out of a lower resourced
Well, and I think part of it is you don't
program.
know what you don't know, right? Like you don't
True. That's
know.
true.
So what certain people are getting in the resources that they have available to them. Um, and there's also that grit determination too. Like if a kid can come out of those schools in Alabama and have, some of that more determination, some more grit that maybe a kid in West Des Moines doesn't have, or like suburbs
Like
of
it's been
Chicago.
too easy for them or something.
Right. Like
Like some
I,
of those, yeah.
we were just in Chicago not that long ago, and in the suburbs of Chicago, very different ball game than in the urban areas in Chicago. Like
Hmm.
so, and I think that's one of the other hard things that we have is, you know, some of those areas that are have the sorry, have some of the least number of resources, um, are producing some of the kids that are going to completely change, the society.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So that's such an interesting, um, I mean, it goes back to every kid that's coming in your door has a story. Every kid throughout the whole country has a story and has different capacity for um coping or having resilience for
Yeah, I mean, like
whatever situation they're thrown into,
my
right?
my morning was completely wrapped around resilience this morning,
Right.
and that's tough. And we're lucky that we have the resources that we do to support our kids through a tragic event, that not everybody has.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Whew, that's a lot. There's a lot of things there that again, you as an educator don't have control over. As a parent, we don't even have control over,
Right.
obviously. But like doing the best, we all are doing the best we can, right? With the resources
Well,
we have, I think is
and I think that's important. As educators, we're trying to get better at this. It's like we know our parents have the best interest of their kids at heart, right? And,
mhm.
and we hope that the parents know that we have the best interests of their kids in heart as well. Um, and being able to work together,
Yeah.
is sometimes difficult because we do have different expectations, or we do have different outcomes that we see for kids. Um, and just trying to make sure that that open line of communication is there, and that the respect level is there, and that we are in it for, the kids. Like I don't come to work today because of, just because I like making people cry. I am coming because I want to see kids be successful, and I want our community to be a better place, for our kids and my students here. And
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, so let's dig into a little bit more. Like we've touched on a little bit of things that are challenging and a little bit of the things that are good. But in the education system, and you can think of the wider education system or specifically in the district,
Mhm.
what do you think the system does well when it comes to value and worth?
So I think that we've changed a lot in the last, you know 10 years, 5 to 10 years, about providing more opportunities for kids, um,
Hmm.
to show their individual skill sets.
Yeah,
For us, we sat through, about 5 years ago, our portrait of a graduate with, multiple stakeholders from around the community, business owners, families, students, um, just other community members, on what they want our graduates to look like when they leave Muscatine High School, right? So as a part of that, then we were able to develop some different pathways for kids, that aren't your traditional well,
mhm,
not your traditional pathways. So, we always had our college bound kids, and we probably divided them up into some even a little bit further, where we had like our, higher institutions, our Ivy League schools, West Coast, East Coast, organizations. We have our state, regent schools, and then we had our like community college, and then or technical school aspect, where now like we still have those lines, but then we've also opened up a ton of our work-based learning and our welding programs and our agriculture programs, to allow kids to like have different classes that will lead them to the path that they want to see for themselves, and we continue to try to develop that a little bit more. We continue to add some more things to those, but it's also hard because at that same time, when you have diminishing resources, like to continue those pathways makes it more difficult. So, we've been able to devote some staff members specifically to some of those pathways, which has helped us. So I think we've done a good job of being able to give opportunities to kids to develop some skills that will benefit them as they move down their chosen path for a career.
Right. I love that too, though, because I think something else that you've provided opportunities for that I've seen is more experiential type of opportunities. So if there are kids that are maybe they have in their mind they want this career path, that maybe they can actually do a little bit of exploration or hands-on before they graduate, and then they get that as, whether they
Yeah,
decide
I
to
would
go to
say
wherever the next thing is, and it's
our
like,
job
oh,
our
I don't
job
really like
shadow
this.
stuff, our job shadow experiences, our internship experiences that we've been able to develop. We have kids that, and I have to give, our local businesses and corporations a ton of thanks for this, because without them, we couldn't do any of this stuff. But, we have, you know, huge Fortune 500 corporations that are employing our high school kids and giving them a chance to truly experience what it's going to be like. And we're able to give them credit for that, high school credit for that. And that's tremendous for opportunities, not only for us and our kids, but then also the corporations, because they can look at those kids and say, and now they have some homegrown talent that, will possibly stay in the community when, when
Right.
they get done with college, when they get done with technical school, when they graduate high school, depending on what they're doing. And that's for us with a community that is aging and probably shrinking in size. Like
Mhm.
we have to, like we don't recruit a bunch of outside people that want to come into the community. So
Mhm.
if we can continue to like keep kids here and being successful and being, hold on one second. I
Mhm.
apologize.
Mhm.
I'm getting interrupted here. So
Okay. It's a
so
brief interruption. That's
yeah,
okay.
sorry about that. I apologize.
I mean, you're actually on the job right now, so I
I
appreciate you
am,
taking
yeah.
the time to do this with me. Um, so we're talking about the different opportunities that you have, and have you noticed, just out of curiosity, the kids that you've been, um, involved with and seen them take on these opportunities, have you noticed anything about how it impacts maybe their confidence and their worth, their self-esteem, maybe as they get
Yeah,
to
so like I,
participate in
I'm
these things?
I'm thinking of the signing ceremony we had for a student this spring that's gonna sit or going to he'll be here for the mornings, and then the afternoons he'll be at the corporation working specifically with their IT department.
Mhm.
And like the change that he has had from freshman year to now, like the growth of responsibilities, like his demeanor, the way he talks to people has changed dramatically. And part of that is growing up, but I think also part of that is like he's found a niche um within the school and the community that sees him as valuable. And then
Yeah.
that's rubbed off on his personal sense of worth as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe that goes to that, you know, worth in our own self-value. It can't happen in a bubble. Like it doesn't happen in a bubble because that's not the way human beings are.
Right.
We do rely on seeing our value based on the relationships we have with other people. Um, and I know in education and in other places they talk about, especially with kids, you know, how important it is to have even just one positive adult interaction, and how that really can change a kid's life.
Well, and obviously that's our goal. Our goal is to have every one of our kids have at least one adult that they feel comfortable talking to on a regular basis within the building. And and I'll admit, like, we don't make that happen. Like, it doesn't happen with every kid. And
Mhm,
that's unfortunate. And we continue to work on that. We continue to try to do a better job of reaching those kids. Um,
mhm.
but it's hard, you know.
Yeah. Well, and by the time they get to you, they've had a lot of life experience already.
Oh,
So it
absolutely.
could be really, really hard
Well,
to make connections with some
it,
of those kids.
especially if you wrap it into, their parents may have had a poor educational experience, and then they've had, 8 grades of less than, stellar academic experiences. So
Mhm.
yeah, when they get to us, they already have some sense of this is what I am or this is who I am, and
Right.
it's hard to change that.
Yeah. Already feel like they're kind of set in who they are and what their future may hold.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. But I will say from a parent, I love to see the changes that are happening, that have happened in the district and all the opportunities that are available for our kids now is just it's pretty amazing. And like you've said before, we're really lucky in this district that we
Absolutely.
have
We're
those
we're extremely
opportunities.
lucky. And we're not perfect. We're far from perfect. Like, there's a lot of things that we can continue to do better.
Sure.
And you know, um I also, I look at, like, we we fight this all the time, but, like, it's hard to continue to give chances to kids when they burn bridges, right?
Hmm.
If a student or adult or whoever has burned some bridges, like, at some point in time, it gets hard to continue to give them additional chances. But that's what we're supposed to do. Like, this is a growing time for kids and opportunities for kids. And if we aren't willing to do it, like, who is?
Well, and I think it goes to maybe, like from my perspective and my work, when I talk about inherent worth, is the whole thing is everybody has it. It's not something that can be given or taken away, and it's yours. But depending on how our experiences have been in life, we tend to not think we have it. We
Right.
tend to, and for when you continue to give the chances and the chances and the chances, sometimes it's like you hope you'll break through that shell of whatever that student has built up over the years and thinking that they aren't, that they aren't worthy of whatever the thing is. Maybe they just aren't worthy of a good high school experience and whatever it is. But that action of just as much as you can continuing to give those chances and opportunities for them to um, maybe tap back into that.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. And I know part of it is that you have to.
Yeah. Well,
You're
yeah,
in
it
public
is.
school,
Yeah, we have to. But and we want to,
but you
like,
want to. Yeah.
right. So, and we still need to do a better job of developing those pathways for students to show, like, there are multiple ways for a kid to be successful, and there's multiple avenues um for our students to be constructive citizens, or however you'd like to say it.
Mhm.
And that's something that we've not done a great job of in the past.
Mhm.
And and it's still difficult because like I touched on earlier, we don't know exactly what this is going to look like, 10 years from now, and what opportunities our kids will have that, that sit out in front of them. So trying to prepare them for that is, trying to prepare for the unknown is obviously difficult.
Mhm. Which you can only do what you can do with that. Yeah, you don't have a crystal ball, but I think giving that, when you talk about trying to give them present day success goes a long way to building their
Yeah, and
self-confidence and self-worth.
I still struggle with that. Like because what does present day success look like? Because like grades don't
Yeah,
matter to everybody,
true.
a positive comment doesn't matter necessarily all the time. So like, how can we show those present day successes, without truly knowing what that kid values? So, I mean,
And I
that's
suppose maybe that's the work
right.
is I know it's hard to dig down to every student's individuality, but like you said, all those kids have a story that come in the door and
But, and
yeah,
you're right.
you'll learn.
That is the work. That is the
Yeah,
work that
that
we
is
need.
the work. Yeah. It's very difficult um in a system like yours to truly get totally individualized. Like
Yeah.
that's nearly impossible, but I know that's the goal. You guys are, always trying to work for the best result for each individual student.
Yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, I don't know of a better way to put that. Like, we want the best for each individual kid, whatever that may be.
Right, exactly. Whatever that might be. So I'm curious, again, we've touched on this a little bit, but what do you feel like the education system doesn't do so well or could really improve on? Like if you could pick one thing that you would love to see the school system improve on, to help with worth, what would that
I
be?
think part of it is we need to start way earlier, right? We need to start
Yeah,
developing, like, and some people do that extremely well, and it is easier in some respects at an elementary level when a teacher has, 24-ish kids to worry about, right? Compared to
mhm.
a high
And they
school.
can really get to know them,
Right,
right?
they can.
Yeah.
Now, their job is far from easy because they have
Oh,
multiple
no,
other things to worry about, right?
not
But
at
if
all, of
you
course.
you get to know, those 24 kids really well, whereas like a high school, middle school teacher may have 124 kids that they see on a daily basis. So,
Right.
yeah, they're not going to get to know those kids as well typically. Um, so we, developing and providing some more resources at the elementary level would be huge for us to do. The other thing is making sure like that we have the right people hired. Like if
Mhm.
a kid at the elementary level has a subpar teacher for a year, like that is going to
That's
haunt that
damaging.
kid for a long time.
That's damaging. Yeah,
So as a
absolutely.
district, and obviously though these conversations are sometimes, those maybe education isn't the right job for you conversations, like
Mhm.
very difficult to have, but completely necessary to have
Mhm.
because you can't afford, for that teacher to have a 10-year, 20-year career, and now you're looking at 500 kids that have just been harmed for a significant portion of their young lives because the
Mhm.
teacher just didn't what shouldn't have been where they were.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? It's hard for me to think of many more jobs that have that big of an impact, like an emotional impact on
Mhm.
somebody's trajectory, you know? Y- Like a teacher, for example, who really shouldn't be a teacher, they could go work at almost any company and they wouldn't have the emotional lifelong impact on a human being
Right. Yep,
the
absolutely.
way a teacher does. I mean, it's imperative that you could get good people in there. And that's
Mhm.
hard to do, I know.
Oh, absolutely. And it's getting continuing to get harder. We would at one point, like, well, 10, 13 years ago or whatever it was when I started my administrative career and I was hiring teachers, like it wouldn't be unusual for me to have 30 applicants for a first grade teacher position, right? Now,
Mhm.
like we're gonna get three, maybe five.
Yeah.
And like it's just really difficult then to hire that right person, and which makes it more imperative for us to continue to teach to retain those staff that you have.
Mhm.
So, and it is getting harder.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like the thing that the education system is not doing so well um, is necessarily attracting good people into
Yeah,
the
and
career
that's
or
probably that's a really broad generalization, because we're attracting a lot of great kids.
you are,
Right.
but attracting a lot of people, but it seems like education is less desired as a career.
I would say,
Would that
yeah,
be,
and yeah,
and maybe
absolutely.
that's a better way to put it. There are less people
Well,
maybe wanting to be in education.
and I think about that personally too. And I, like you and I have talked about this a couple times with, like, it would be hard in a lot of days. It would be
Mhm.
hard for me to tell my own kids to go into education. Like, hey, you should
Yeah.
be a teacher,
Yeah.
because there is that, like, it's not just the job, but it's the emotional side of it too, that
Yeah.
I think we underestimate. And we do a thing, and that's probably one of the things that we don't do a good job of in education, is preparing our kids for the emotional side of work, like,
Yeah.
and the
Mhm. That
stress of
resilience part.
work.
I
Right.
mean, yeah,
And
the
it's
emotional
hard,
load.
because how do you prepare a kid for some of that stuff without damaging them as well?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because there isn't a class in that.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's not a class in resilience and grit. Like, we don't have that.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you'd hope, sometimes just experiences within the system, whether it's preparing for a test or writing a paper and they have some stress or they have some emotional anguish that goes with
Yeah.
it, like maybe helping them prepare for that or getting involved in activities, whether it's a sports or fine arts or whatever, and building
Which
some of that
obviously, like, and we
um,
know that we have way more success with kids who are involved than if a kid
in
is.
some activity,
Like,
right? Yeah.
absolutely, whatever that activity may be, from our Dungeons and Dragons club to the football team, like, and we have like 75 different activities that a kid can participate in here at the high school, which again, that shows the inequity across the educational system as well, because, like, we are able to provide 75 different opportunities
Right.
for kids,
That
whereas
school district of 200,
is not right.
you're probably lucky if you have a football team and a basketball team
Right.
and some of those sports
And those
teams.
are the
Maybe
same
you
kids.
have a band.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. Like, I think some of those bigger, like, band, sports, choirs, like, those are easier
Mhm.
to
But
maintain.
may not have the things that fit. I mean, you're not going to have all 200 of those kids that necessarily find those to be the things that they want to do.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
like, the other thing of it is then, like, we're very lucky as a district, we're putting $1 million into orchestra instruments, you
Yeah,
know,
which is amazing.
and for
Amazing.
our kids that can't afford to buy their own, because there's also that
There's a
resources from a
cost. Yeah.
family aspect of it. So, like, if
Yep.
we can help to limit that, we're going to, and we've done a great job of that, being able to provide opportunities for our kids that may not be able to afford it otherwise. But again, that just highlights the inequity across the country, that not every district can do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's so crazy. So again, it's like speaking specifically from our district experience, we are lucky to have resources to provide quite a lot of experiences for
Absolutely.
our students. Then it shows if we're paying attention. Not everybody pays attention, but the people who are paying attention realize how fortunate like our specific district is and how it compares to other districts and their opportunities. Um, and
Yeah.
that's maybe again where education falls short as a system as a whole. It's not.
Well, and I also, like, look back on, our fundraising opportunities and things that we do within our district that districts don't do. And, part of me is amazed by the generosity of our community, right?
Yeah, for
And,
sure.
the
Mhm.
fact that we're able to raise $50,000 at a basketball game in February so,
Yes.
supporting our activities, through buying some cakes. But also at that same time was like, I wish we didn't have to do that. That
Right.
we like with the opportunities would be there regardless. And thank goodness for our generous community and our outreach and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
that doesn't happen everywhere. I
Exactly.
look at, our spring awards night, which one of my favorite nights of the year, where I'm able to sit up on stage and give over $300,000 in scholarships to kids.
Right.
Like that doesn't happen everywhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just crazy to me that the amount of things that we can do, but I wish necessarily we didn't have to.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. 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 And so we do those things. We have those things. We have those things
Right.
to be grateful for. And that is something that our district is fortunate for and does well and contributes to those positive experiences that the students can have. Um, that hopefully does bring self-confidence and self-esteem and help them with their sense of value. Um, and again, the things that it sounded like we could do better. I think for one, you talk about the system as a whole, the equity issues. Like, wouldn't it be great if every school district across the whole United States, just because this is where we live, so that's what I'm speaking about, but um, really had the equitable opportunities. Like every single student in the country, could you
Yeah.
imagine if they
Yeah.
had
No, I mean,
access to the great facilities and the options for activities and the opportunities for, job experiences and internships?
yeah.
That would be amazing. And just think of the kids coming out and how they could have, what kind of experience they would have and how that might branch out into their careers and their lives and their families and all the things. Um,
And I mean, I think that leads, like, like I've always said, and I continue to focus on, like, everyone deserves the best possible education that they can have, regardless of where they grow up, who their family is, what kind of resources they have at home. Like
yeah, for
everyone
sure.
that walks through my door should have the same opportunities regardless.
Mhm. Same opportunities, same, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that if we can make that, if we can fix that,
If you can fix that, then you fix a lot of
wave a
problems.
magic wand, fix that. Yeah, exactly. And I think along with that, if we had all schools that were like fully resourced, um, and had all those opportunities, it maybe it then education as a career, maybe it would be an easier sell. And
Yeah,
you would have um more people interested in going into education and making teaching their career choice because they would feel supported as educators and really have what they need behind them to be those positive influences in the students' lives.
yeah, and I'm very proud of what our high school, what our teachers, our district has been able to do. And
Right.
we've done a lot of good things. There's a lot of things that we still need to work on and
Of
continue to
course.
talk about. But I am proud of what we've done. You know, we've set forth on a pathway that I think is beneficial for all kids. Um, and we'll continue to refine that pathway and make it easier for kids to access. But we're trying and we're gonna get there.
Right. And again, just to bring it back to worth, it's such an interconnected web, I believe. The
Mhm.
impact we have on just one kid, just one student. You think about the web that builds out when that kid is feeling valued and how that impacts that student's relationships, with his or her family, friends, other teachers, other adults in the community, their peers. And I don't know, I just feel this that again, once you build that solid thing for one kid, like how it radiates out and impacts
Absolutely. You make an
everybody in the
difference to
community.
one kid, you're making a difference to multiple people.
Yeah. I always talk about the ripple effect. And I think and so I appreciate, I'm so happy you're in education because I think it's important. I know it can be very challenging, but also really, really rewarding. So
Oh, absolutely,
I'm
absolutely.
super proud of you and
Well, thank you.
appreciate you and appreciate all of your staff, all of your employees. I know you guys
We have some great ones. We have
you
some great.
have a really important job that I know can be really challenging, again, really rewarding, but we're grateful. We're really lucky. So as we wrap up today, I first want to thank you
Mhm.
because I know this was hard to schedule and I know you probably would have opted out if I wouldn't have kept bugging you about it.
There's part of me that was hoping you'd forgot.
Oh, you know, I never forget.
Yeah, I'm well aware.
Yeah, so I wonder as we close, is there any last word of wisdom you want to
You,
share?
I think like I just obviously in education we want the best for every kid. And that might not always seem that way from an outside source or like an outside perspective. But we do. Everyone in like for my building specifically, like everyone cares about our kids' success. And everybody wants that sense of success for every one of our kids. You know, for us, seeing them walk across the stage in May is huge, and I've gotten the opportunity to hand out a lot of diplomas to kids that I wasn't sure were going to make it, you know,
Mhm.
um, and seeing their face and, being able to hug a kid that, you know, 3 months before that was homeless, couch surfing on friends' houses, things like that. Like those are huge things and a huge difference maker for our kids. And, being able to continue to try and develop that sense of worth in our kids is huge for us. And, it's a never ending battle, but we're going to continue to work on it. So,
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the work that you do.
well, I
I
appreciate you.
know.
Thank you for allowing me to talk to you today. So,
Yeah, I appreciate you being on and sharing your perspective on value and worth in education is very insightful. And for any of you who viewed this episode, if you found it interesting and insightful, please share with your friends and go ahead and subscribe to this channel. And we'll be back with an episode again soon.